Good morning, Morgan Yasfor here. 7 o'clock, bright and early on a Thursday morning. We talk about how life happens, and just this week it works out that this is when had time to do it. Been all over with baseball and just other things going on right now. It is the middle of the summer. You would think sports news and sports, topics would be a little bit less, and you kind of have to be a little creative and just talk about more some random things. This is where you get your Mount Rushmore of the NBA, or your favorite Cyclones, your favorite Hawkeyes, or your top 10 moments, or anything else like that. And there is still time for that. And Trev's out this week. He's on a work trip that he needed to get to. So it's just me, and not going to be super long this morning. But this week, I was jotting down some notes, just some topics to talk about. And there's actually lots of sports stuff, some of it local and some of it national, and some of it worldwide, obviously, with the World Cup. And we're not going to really talk too much about the World Cup, but it is absolutely fascinating that all these people are coming from around the world and love the American culture, the pop culture stuff, going to baseball games, not paying attention to the game, have no idea what's going on, but they're having fun. Boston and the Scotland the Tartan Army from Scotland. Now they went down to Miami. Unfortunately, they did get beat. Norway and the Norwegians doing their rowing the boat chant, and all the TikToks and everything, just going to Buc-ee's and Waffle House and just finding out how America lives. And we realize that we are all better off than we think we are. Yes, there's things that we need to do better here in America, but overall we've got it pretty good. Air conditioning and ice are two of the biggest things that the Europeans just can't fathom. And I've heard that from people. I've never been to Europe, but I do. My parents have been there, and I know other people have been there. And air conditioning is not expected, or not even an option many places. And ice, you don't get that either. I believe you can get it if you ask, but you don't just get it. So it's just kind of funny that, many people think that, we're all just whatever, but they get here and they love it, and just the differences. And we are much more alike than we are different worldwide. All right, so that's enough of that. I just want to hit a couple topics here. Sorsby, the NFL said no to a supplemental draft, so he's going to have to wait till 2027 draft to get to the NFL. There is some questions. He's going back to court. Can he go back to Texas Tech? I have no idea. It's amazing what can be done when you have some money and a lawyer. But I do really like how the Big 12 and now the NFL are just telling him no and trying to hold him accountable. I do think it would not be the worst thing in the world if Texas Tech did take him back, but under the understanding you get all the support of a student athlete and a student at Texas Tech. You can be in the locker room. You can do everything with the understanding he is never playing a snap. No matter what happens, no matter 5 quarterbacks get hurt, 0 quarterbacks get hurt, he is not playing for Texas Tech. Be on the team, try to do everything and then support him. I mean, that's what you do as a college student and a college to a student athlete, but with the understanding he never steps foot on the field in a meaningful game for Texas Tech. NBA draft was the last couple nights. Some local ties there. Bennett Sturts drafted number 16 to Minnesota. To Memphis, and traded to to Oklahoma City. And then Joshua Jefferson from Iowa State was drafted 28 by Minnesota and then traded to Brooklyn. So both guys were traded almost immediately to much different. The Nets obviously are not very much of a contender right now, but Oklahoma City is a great spot. Be a great team to learn from. They're really, really good. They're going to compete for a championship. Bennett Sturts, I heard this, and this is just kind of funny. He's not going to know what to do sitting on the bench. He's played under McCollum. He played almost 40 minutes every single game, and he's not going to do that immediately. And even, the best players in the NBA don't play every game, and then obviously they don't play every minute. So that's just going to be a different change. It was just kind of a weird take, but it's reality. He's not used to sitting on the bench, and he is going to have to get used to that in more ways than one. I was just out in Omaha for 4.5 days or 5 days for Tyler playing baseball out there in conjunction with the College World Series. Went to one game out there. Been there several times, both at Rosenblatt and now at the new Charles Schwab Field the last few years. Great atmosphere. Oklahoma, wins, getting 11th in the SEC, going 0-1 in the conference tournament, but then they get in and get hot. It just proves the Southeastern Conference by far and away is the best baseball conference in America when you can finish 11th in the conference and go on to win the national championship. And they were just phenomenal in this entire run. I think they had to beat Georgia Tech twice, but after that, they swept Kansas and then only lost one game going in, in the World Series. I mean, that's kind of obvious because that's what you do to win the World Series. All right, now the last two topics that are on my list are ones that we want to dive into today, and they're the name of the podcast and everything, and that is first, alcohol beer sales in Jack Trice Stadium and Hilton Coliseum coming up this season in 2026, 27, and going forward. Surprising, but not surprising. A couple reasons for that. One, we have a new president. New president came in March. Jamie Pollard was very, very vocal over the past several years that alcohol was not being, obviously they looked into it, but not being brought into Jack Trice Stadium or Hilton Coliseum in the common areas. There, if you're in the suites or the suck up area that you're buying special seats, you get that priority and you were able to buy alcohol or have alcohol in your spot. Johnny's in Hilton Coliseum is the same way. You buy those seats or buy those passes, however you do that, you could get alcohol in Jack Trice or Hilton Coliseum, depending which one. But now, just in the concourses, just there, anybody of age can go buy a beer, or I think they had like a wine thing or different prepackaged alcohol sales. So, new president. I think that is the key factor in this. Jamie Pollard, I think, fell on the sword saying we weren't going to do alcohol, but in the timely fashion that this happened, I do believe the new president came in and said, hey, this is a revenue stream we are not tapping, and we need to do it. I know there were alcohol sales at North Dakota State when Dr. Cook was there, so he came in with a mind of how it worked, how they did it there, the good parts, the bad parts, and there's going to be some people that just cannot handle it, but there's people right now that can't handle it because you drink a whole bunch of beers before you get in, you leave at halftime, you go drink a few more beers and you come in, or you sneak some beers in. You know how it is. I mean, we've all done it. Now, with selling beer, one of the big changes is we are not going to be able to leave at halftime to go back to the camper real quick and grab a hot dog that are already there. And I think that might be a bigger factor than actually selling beer, because what's going to happen is I heard Jamie Pollard, he was on Travis and Ross, the Rush in the morning, and he's like, there's 4,000 people that go out at halftime. That, 61,000 seat stadium, that's quite a few. And if 4,000 people leave and come back, now they can't leave. Yes, they're going to buy a beer or two, but I think more importantly, they might, and this is where you're going to make maybe even more money, is will they stay and buy a chicken, a hot dog, a corn dog, for the kids, an extra pop, an extra chicken tender meal. And that's where you're going to make more money as well. So I think overall, it's a very good thing. And I think the bigger change is going to be not leaving at halftime, and all the students and everything that do that run out to their site, and some of those bigger donors that their camper and their setup is truly just right outside the stadium, running outside real quick. I've done it. Get across the bridge real quick, try to get a beer or two, And the biggest thing is you're not back in the stadium right at kickoff of the second half. And sometimes in close games, which I believe, much like Matt Campbell played, Jimmy Rogers is going to play a ball control, and all the games are going to be close. Maybe not right away here. We got to get the talent back injected into it. But we need those people in the stadium right at the second half instead of, after 5 minutes where, maybe we needed a big third down stop on defense and we needed the stadium super loud, and now there's 4,000 people not in there. Or, Iowa State makes it a huge play and, it just isn't as loud as it could have been if it's a kickoff return or a punt block or whatever it might be. This gives the chance for the stadium to be full the entire game instead of just at the beginning and then, the last few minutes before halftime and the first few minutes out of halftime. It's not as much. Or even, if it does become a block, well, they're not going to come back in. They're just going to watch it at their camper or whatever. And that still might happen, in blowout situations. But if the game is close, most people, tickets, are not as cheap as they used to be. They pay to be there. And yes, it's the experience. And yes, it's not always about the 60 minutes inside Jack Trice Stadium. It's the entire day. It's the weekend. It's seeing friends that you don't see except for the 7 times a year, whatever it might be. I do understand that. I have friends that come there and tailgate with us. And a lot of times they don't even have tickets to the game. They're just there for the hangout and the show and, the experience and seeing each other. And that's what makes Iowa State football and Iowa State athletics great, in my opinion. So I think it's a good thing. It's just they're asking so much of everybody, sponsors, donors, your everyday fans, for money to pay for the athletes and just everything that it costs to run an athletic department. This is a revenue stream that they hadn't, Jamie Pollard talked it as a lever, hadn't pulled the lever yet. And so they are doing that. And people think, well, this is going to be a $5 million revenue stream. No, it is not. I think he said, if you go buy a $15 beer, which that's probably about what it's going to be, they get like $2 or $3. So, a third of the money. So if you sell $3 million worth of beer, you might make $1 million because you got to obviously buy the beer. You got to pay the people. You got to, there's just lots of things that do come in. Profit and revenue are two different numbers. So I would expect between Hilton Coliseum and Jack Trice Stadium for it to be over $1 million. And I look at it as that is paying for a really good basketball player or a really good football player. It buys you one player. In the football world, it probably gets your quarterback or most of a quarterback. And in basketball, it gets a really good player. Probably not your best player, but probably a starter. So, or you can look at it as you're paying for, some depth pieces, 3-4 depth pieces at $250,000 a piece. So it's a step that needed to be done when you're asking for money from every angle. This is one that needed to be pushed, and they are. So proud of Iowa State. I do think it had, maybe Jamie Pollard was against it, and the president came in and said, nope, we're doing this. I don't know that. I kind of lean towards, I believe the president was against it. So now we got a new president, and he's for it. So they're doing it very, very quickly here. All right. Now the last thing here, and I know some of you listen to this on Steve Shetler Media, and he has went through this, and he's went out on his own and done his own thing. And we are very, very grateful for that, to be on Steve Shetler Media here every Thursday night. And then obviously I've been on there on the sports show in the Saturday mornings with my golf team. And I've been, announced games for Pekin basketball. So very, very lucky and grateful for the relationship we have with Steve Shetler and the media. But he's went out on his own because media groups and KXNO in Des Moines is the local radio, sports talk radio station, laid off all of their employees. Now there is one show on there that, friends, Trent Condon Miller and Condon, which Kent Miller, this is the worst part of the whole thing. He was supposed to retire yesterday, and he refused to go on the air. He was on there for about 15 minutes, just called in because they laid everybody else off. Now, Miller and Condon own their own show. They buy the time. They sell their own advertising, so they are still on. And that is the one show I still do listen to. I'll be honest, I do not listen to the morning show or the afternoon show as I once did. I'm not going to say I never listened to it, but I don't listen to it as much because but at one time, I listened to all three shows. There's a morning show, roughly 6 to 8, 6 to 9. Then the midday show, which is Miller and Condon, which is noon to 2 now. And then the afternoon show was 3 to 6 or 3 to 5. The times changed throughout the years. The afternoon show used to be Ross Peterson and Chris Williams, who both have left that station and went out on their own in both different paths. The morning show was Heather Burnside and Travis Justice, and now Travis and Ross are together in the mornings on the Morning Rush. They're on right now. They go 6 to 8 in the morning. They went out on their own. Travis and Ross did, and then Chris Williams went out on his own. Murph and Andy were a midday show as well. Used to actually be 4 shows, I believe, on there. And they've went out on their own, joined Chris Williams at Iowa Everywhere, which, if you are a local Iowa sports person, Iowa Everywhere is a great spot to listen to Cyclone and Hawkeye, and then just some, Big 12, Big 10, and they're getting some wider reach stuff, and then just some general talk shows or whatever. And Travis and Ross go in the morning. They are a loose, I'm going to call it very, very loose talk sports radio show. It's based in sports, but it is more of just an entertainment. I find those two guys really, really funny, and they get off on tangents that have nothing to do with sports, and that's what makes that show just a little bit different. Miller and Condon, noon to 2, I believe will stay on the air. Ken Miller did retire yesterday, so Trent Condon is staying. He did hire a guy, and I assume they're going to go forward with it. I'm pretty sure in the morning and afternoon they're going to go to national content. I turned it on yesterday morning. I was driving around, and I heard Dan Patrick, and there was Dan Patrick on there some anyway. It wasn't from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night local radio. It wasn't that. There was some time in there that Dan Patrick was on it, but I'm going to guess they're going to get the whole Dan Patrick show. I think the whole Colin Cowherd show, but it's a sad, sad state. There's some local ties to this. Heather Burnside is an Ottumwa graduate. She's been in the local radio scene, TV scene for a long, long time. She was on Sound Off with Keith Murphy when Andy Fales left. She's been on KGGO. She's, been at different time slots and around Des Moines and different stations, but she's a local person. And this isn't Des Moines. Emery Songer, again, another Ottumwa graduate, but he was here in Oskaloosa as well at KBOE, was an iHeart, and he was based out of Omaha, and he started with sports, and now I believe he was, a WHO guy, and then one of their channels out in Omaha. He was laid off as well. So a couple local people there that are affected. No doubt that they will land on their feet somewhere, but it just stinks. And then the biggest thing is you just don't get that local radio show. They're not going to go do a local spot at, Shields, at, Big Grove Brewery, the local restaurant downtown that at Fong's or whatever they might do, all the different sponsors that they were doing. And most of them are young people. One guy, Alec Bussey, who you can still find on Cyclone Report. I always get those like 247 and different publications kind of mixed up. But he just got married last weekend or the weekend before. Sean Roberts, who we've seen, those of us that are old have grown up there in Des Moines. He graduated from Grandview and started as a producer and worked his way up to the drive time host. He just had a kid a year ago, got married. A couple other guys, Lucas Strain, local Urbandale kid. He was on the Little League World Series team and some of those Urbandale really good baseball teams years ago now. And then the producers that you don't hear much about, but those guys, And the crazy thing, none of these people are getting rich. It's not like they've got $200,000 salary they're trying to cut. Might be $200,000 for all 6 of them that got cut. But it looks a little bit better on the big spreadsheet. iHeartMedia makes this decision. Now, the crazy part was in 2020, before the pandemic in January, some of those people, Heather and Sean, were actually let go before, but Murph and Andy were still there at that time. And they, kind of refused to go on the air and got them all hired back. So I've actually been fired twice, and Ross Peterson actually was fired twice as well, which is crazy. They had, like I've heard a lot, and Heather went on Trent Condon show just real quick, and was more talking about Ken Miller. That was the worst part of the whole thing. Everybody, that sucks, everybody to lose their job and everything, but Ken Miller, who was started in Des Moines radio 30 years ago yesterday, did not do his own show just because he didn't feel it was right to celebrate himself and celebrate radio, sports radio in Des Moines when so many people were affected. And you got to stand up and give him props for that. That is a stand-up guy. Now, he's retiring, so that didn't affect him, but it does affect a lot of people. And it's just another spot that local ownership matters. Not that iHeartMedia is going to sell that radio station, but if anybody has the opportunity or the know-how and the money to buy that station from iHeart and get it back local, I encourage you to do that. I just don't see it. Those people will find a way because, people like, I do a podcast. Now, I don't sell advertising. Maybe I should or everything. I don't need to do this for money. I got a full-time job and everything. But there are some places where they might be able to land. Three Beards Media would be a spot maybe where they could go. He's Chris Shipley there, who does a great job with Cyclone and Hawkeye and regular podcasts. They have, a whole podcast network and I know they're friends with a few of those guys. Would be maybe a place. Iowa Everywhere is an opportunity, maybe. I know you just got to make those decisions, or those people know how to do this. You can do it on your own. Hustle, and you can, they have relationships with sponsors and stuff. And Heather Burnside has, I just see her definitely not being done with this, but, maybe doing it on her own, maybe with a little help from somebody. But, she has relationships all over town and can get sponsors and can make it work, I believe, with who she wants to. If she wants to do it by herself or with other people. But I think she can do that. And they all have that opportunity. Spend a few $100s a year on a program that does it, and you can do it, and then you can make as much or as little money as you want. And obviously, the more they've got a built-in listenership that they have had over the years at the radio station, and they can do that on their own, and hopefully that works out. Whatever they choose to do works out for them. So that's about all for today. I do want to thank everybody for listening. It is summertime, a little bit different time. It is 7:30 in the morning right now. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week. I believe Trevor will be back. I talked to him the other day, but we didn't discuss that. But I believe next week Trevor will be back. We'll talk the latest news and sports notes and maybe just some random stuff. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.